Please be advised that in order to foster quality discussions in each episode, we will spoil the stories in each game and text we talk about. Good news is, 90% of the titles we cover are old enough that many of you might already know all about them. That said, we do encourage you to play and read before listening.
Listen up now, when you leave on, get ready for Arcade Bookshop. Read your book, play a game, check it out. Don't be lame, listen up now, when you leave on, get ready for Arcade Bookshop.
So, Caleb, when was the last time you read something contemporary that made a good, political point or, something relevant to the times, and it didn't come off cliche or dull or boring? Have you ever read anything like that recently, the last 5-10 years?
Oh, I'm sure I have. Not Stephen King's Elevation. That was very ham-fisted.
Elevation?
Yeah, it was a Stephen King story about lesbians and some guy who, though he looks like he is a full-figured man, he keeps getting lighter. And it's pretty stupid. It was a novella, I believe. No, what was a contemporary? See, I read a lot of stuff, but it usually ends up not being contemporary.
Yeah.
I would say The Road by Cormac McCarthy, but I don't know if that's really political because you don't actually know the catalyst for the catastrophe that happens in that book. I would assume it was a political in nature, like a nuclear war or something, but it could have been environmental. What about you?
I can't think of anything.
Nothing.
And I gotta be honest, I don't read a lot of contemporary stuff, but every time that I do, I'm not satisfied. The last thing I can remember that was really contemporary, I think, was David Duchovny's book, Truly Like Lightning.
I've been meaning to read that, but I haven't gotten to him yet. Actually, I think I bought Spencer that for Christmas last year, but I haven't read it.
Did he read it?
Not yet.
Okay. It's good, but I didn't really love it. It's about a guy that becomes Mormon, and it's got really interesting points. It's it's David Duchovny's take on Mormonism, like the extreme Mormonism, sister wives kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it gets really intense. It's got a decent plot, what's the word? Story arc. But I just can't read contemporary fiction by anybody and feel like it comes off naturally. It always feels a little bit like they're writing an essay
being
in fiction
preached
form.
to almost, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
but before we go on, establish what you consider contemporary, because I always consider contemporary anything after the 70s, but now that's pushing 40, 50 years ago. So
I guess, I don't know.
Let's say after 2000s, because
Yeah,
I think there was a big shift in fiction after the 2000s. And even though I haven't read it, I heard The Handmaid's Tale is a more... it's along the lines of what you're talking about, where it's not preachy or essayist. It's just the nature of the novel unfolds in a way where you're like, holy shit, that's happening. And then I could see that maybe falling into that category.
Yeah, and I don't know what the actual if there are actual definitions that differ between modern fiction or contemporary fiction. I don't know really but yeah, the last 5-10 years. I guess more like 10.
Yeah.
I just think there's so many people trying to make political points or just points of the times, and they get too distracted by making their points, so they can't tell a good story. And a lot of it for me is when it comes to talking about minority group. It's frustrating because I think those things should be talked about because they're relevant to the times. But whenever I experience them, even in movies, and fiction, I experience them, and I can't help but feel like even if I were part of those minority groups, just anything, it doesn't matter whether it's race or whatever, I feel like I would still, if I'm still the person that I am right now, but if I still have the character that I have and I'm in one of those minority groups, I still would hate those things. They just don't come off. Nothing contemporary to me comes off like quality work. It doesn't come off naturally. It's not like I'm experiencing, I'm immersed in the story. I'm always pulled out by the points that are being made.
I was looking through my recently read list, and I couldn't find anything that was contemporary that fits the bill. I know Colson Whitehead has been praised for some of his work, and I'm pretty sure it's most of his stuff is pretty political in nature, but there's a lot of I want to say, I guess I haven't read his work, but I believe lot of magical realism and stuff's incorporated. Even though he's a friend of mine, I would say maybe Nicholas Obregon's books count because he's one of the few contemporary writers I've read where I've really enjoyed his work. But I don't think it's too political. Like his first book, Blue Light Yokohama, I mean, that's set in Japan, so that's kind of hard for us to judge, what would be the political merits of that. But I mean, by no means does he pander to his audience or tries to throw in diversity for diversity's sake or anything like that. It's about the story first. Why is the guy Japanese? Because he's a Japanese detective and it's set in Japan, and that's what you get. His second book, Sins of Scarlet's the one I think would be closer because there's a lot of transgenders. Like it's set where it's in California, I believe. Same protagonist as the first book, and then he ends up going to Mexico where there's like this drug kingpin who I believe is like taking transgender people. He has like a fetish for them, and he's doing like a lot of heinous things and like trafficking and stuff. But what comes across in that book is you just feel for the people, and the story is really good. And you don't actually look at it as like, well, what he's trying to say is the political message of the left is correct because of this or that, or like he doesn't care about that. That's not the focus of the book. It's just the story and the lives of the people that are in the story. And that's how you tell, like John Steinbeck's a great example. Most of his works are political in nature, but you never get the political, like it's just like maybe it's an allegory or something or in the background, but it's the plight of the people. The Grapes of Wrath, East of Eden, like these books are the plight of the people and the socio-economically, whatever they are now. I'm sorry, last episode of the DPW podcast, we end the episode by talking about inclusive writing.
Oh.
So you're not allowed to say poor people anymore.
Really?
Yeah, you have to say socially, economically not challenged. I forget what it was, but it was really annoying. I think I actually sent you the list before, like a week or month or something ago. But underprivileged people, nice way of saying it. He wrote a lot about that, the dirt farmers and shit. And it doesn't come across as pandering or lecturing or trying to get this message across. It was just about the people and the story. And that's what you ultimately want to get across. You don't want this long, boring... I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Maybe Ayn Rand would be a good one of just like trying to get your message and your ideology across, and everybody's like, fuck you. Like, even if you agree with it, you're just like, fuck you. Come on, just tell the story. That's the one that comes to mind for me anyway, but I'm sure there are other writers like that. I just don't read that stuff.
I had to read something. I had to read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand in college. It was like one of the first, it was my first lit class, I think. It was like one of the first books I had to read in college.
And just be Anne. Don't be Ayn. Don't throw a Y in there. Just be Anne.
I don't know if that's actually, I think she pronounces it Ayn.
I don't care what she pronounces.
I don't fucking know. But
stupid lady.
But yeah, oh my God. I liked reading that book, but I know that if I went back and read anything by her, I'd be like, oh my God, shut the fuck up.
Her work was the type of work that appeals to the youth, at least at the time, who are, ideologically inclined and are just searching for their ideas. But once your ideas are kind of cemented and you know who you are and what you believe, that shit just pisses you off.
Right.
But when you're kind of lost and searching for something, especially a lot of people who we've known people personally who just attach to any ideology and hope it sticks. Like, oh, I'm part of this community now, even if it's a bad community. We see that a lot in the U.S. right now, obviously. But she's one of there's a lot of writers like that, actually, that come out and it's just like movie makers, comic book writers. There's always a group of fucking assholes who are just like, I don't actually believe this shit, but I know these people do, so I'm just going to pander to these people.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to write and make work that only this select group's going to like, and the other side's just going to boycott me to hell. But that gets me more press anyway, so yay, I just make money. It's like, don't do shit just for the money. Like, that's terrible.
And I was wondering if you were going to bring up Nicholas Obregon, and I'm still interested in reading something by him. I don't know when I would fit it in, but because it sounds like he's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. I want to read about, I don't know if it's the right word, but I want to read something that addresses diversity. And it's not like a topic that I'm like all about, but I want to be able to experience it in a story that makes me like really feel it, instead of just creating like a superhero movie where there's every different kind of person because they decided they made a point to do that.
The coalition of rainbow people. We have every color on the spectrum. Why? It's not contemporary, but Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison is obviously a great one.
I just heard something about that recently.
Yeah. If you want a more raunchier version of that, Native Son by Richard Wright is written around the same time. Those are both stories about disenfranchised black people in America. Both different. Like Invisible Man is basically like you're invisible when you were black in the 30s and 40s. Like nobody really paid attention to you. You just kind of had a shitty job and you just went through life and you had to deal with injustice. Native Son's a little worse because you get all the injustice and the poverty and everything. That I believe is set in Chicago. But you also get the other side of the coin. Is like, well, this guy's a fucking criminal though still. So it's like, I'm not rooting for him either. He's a piece of shit, but you get why he's a piece of shit. And then that's where you actually get the complexities of a narrative about diversity that, hey, this is still a person. Doesn't matter if it's a black person or a white person, it's a person and it's their story and it's their character that matters. And that what doesn't come across in a lot of contemporary fiction because, and a good example of this is anything where they shoehorn in, let's say, a female character, a person of color, any person, and that's their defining trait, not their character of the person,
right? Not
their merit. Like, that's why I had such a beef with that new Amazon Lord of the Rings show. I ended up really hating it. I watched a couple episodes of it because, you know, I love Lord of the Rings. I love the lore. And it was like, I didn't care if they had black elves and they were incorporating more women and stuff. It's like, whatever, as long as they tell a good story. They didn't tell a good story. They had this fucking Galadriel turned into a warrior for no reason. They took away everything that was likable about her and just made her this headstrong idiot. And just, it was like, this is not the character. Why are you doing this? Because you had to have girl power. She had to be a girl boss and save the day, even though she just caused all her own problems. So it's like, why are we doing this stupid shit? Like she created Sauron basically in that show from when I was watching. I was like, okay, never mind. I'm not about this at all. But it's just like, that's a bad way of doing it. Like you can show the plight of somebody without making that their whole identity. That the key to a good story is you can relate or feel some kind of empathy towards the characters, but you don't feel like, oh, this character is better or worse just because of, you know, whatever trait they have, whether they're gay or their race or the religion, because that's another one that, funny enough, has like been swept to the wayside. Because for a while there, like especially right after 9/11, a lot of fiction and stuff was dealing with anti-Muslim sentiments. And then it was like all this religious ideology came back into fashion where it's like, oh, if you ain't a Christian, you're a bad Muslim and all that dumb shit. But now it's like, if you're just religious, people shit on you.
Yeah.
It's like you can't even be religious anymore without people just like, blah, 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 and then like somehow they're morally better than you. And it's like, why? Why do we do that dumb shit? That's a digression. We don't need to go into that, but
right. I will say I feel like there is a bit of a rise in people choosing to be spiritual or religious or, you know, something in that realm. I feel like there is a sect of our community that's beginning to do that, and it's more accepted than it used to be.
I feel more broad spectrum spirituality than straight organized religion, which I agree with. Like that's great. Yeah. That's way better in my opinion because organized religion gets cultish, you know.
Yeah, or I think the new thing is, and I mean this is probably becoming more common, but not that it's new of the last 5 years or so. It's probably been going on forever, but I think it's becoming more common that people are going to places like churches that practice in organized religion, but don't necessarily follow all of they don't necessarily follow that church or that religion specifically. It's just like, this is my way of getting like practicing spirituality, even though I'm not like considering myself part of this community.
Yeah, so you can, you know, consider yourself even a Catholic maybe, but you don't hate gay people. You're not telling people they can or cannot get abortion. Like you're not strict on, you know, the deep parts of the Bible that people like to cherry pick. You just are like, hey, I like the message of being good to my neighbor and,
right.
you know, just living a moral life and stuff like that. And I have seen a lot more of that, which is good. Because one thing, I mean, we don't have to go too deep into religion or anything, but it does actually go into the book we're reading. Mm. But what I do always like what I liked about religion was the sense of community people get. I feel that's sorely lacking, especially now where people don't even talk to their neighbors hardly. So it's like, I think that is needed, maybe not, you know, religion specifically. It's shifted. Like people just find their groups now. Unfortunately, it's more nefarious ways. Like now they find their community, quote unquote, in political sides, which seems to be the big one. And it's like, oh, you're a liberal, you're a Republican, you, even more specifically, you're a Trumper, you're a, I don't even know what the fucking extreme left is called anymore now, but you get into these groups and then it's like, I have to hate them because they're the other. Now you're going back into religious extremism. It's just your new religion has become politics.
Right.
An ideology of social standing versus spiritual. And I just don't like any of that stuff.
Yeah, me
It's like, just be nice to people. Whatever happened to just being fucking nice to people?
Yeah.
Why can't we do that?
We can. We can.
We can. I do. I personally, except for in traffic, I've been getting bad. The fucking old people, they drive so slow. Just drive fast, drive the speed limit even. I'm fine with the speed limit.
I don't even want to get it seems to be getting worse.
When we get the Arcade Bookshop Patreon eventually, we'll have special episodes where it's just Bryce and Caleb bitch. And it'll just a whole episode about us bitching about things unrelated to books and games.
Yeah, well, it'll be special episodes you pay for to hear us complain.
Yeah. I thought about doing that with DPW. I didn't have enough listener base that would pay, but that would be fun. Just like, hey, we're just going to bitch all episode. Give us $1 and you can hear it.
I think that the author of our book today, we could argue whether or not any of this is deliberate. I do think a lot of it probably is, but just like any writer, there's speculation around whether or not this is like the points that are made that are, that scholars have drawn from the text, or whether they're actually making those points or whether it's just conclusions that readers have made over time. But it seems that this is a case where it's an example of quality writing where you're drawn into the story. You don't necessarily need to acknowledge that there are any like political points being made, any like metaphors for, grand cultural whatever. It's a great story no matter what, but I think it's a good case where if it is deliberate, there's so many different points, themes, and stuff that's ingrained in the story without ruining it, without making that the focal point of the writing, without making it essay-ish.
Well, what Bram Stoker was able to do is he was able to write a cool story where the setting and the characters stand out on their own merit, but you understand the time period.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're reading it when this was written or now, you understand, oh, women were this class of citizen at this time, and it just comes across without him mentioning it. You just understand via their actions. Religion had this impact on the world at this time, and I don't know if you got this, Bryce, but this was one of the first, if not the first, techno thriller.
Techno?
Yeah. Not that kind of techno. It is the first, at least in my reading, especially horror, it's definitely a techno horror, where they use science and at the time modern gadgets to solve their problems. They had gramophones, they used typewriters, they had rifles.
Caleb, today I have with me.
Oh no.
And I'll get to the intro in just a moment, but today I have with me this book that I brought with me from the past, from my college life. It's called Literature and Science in the 19th Century, an anthology edited by Laura Otis. It's an Oxford World Classic. And it's got all these essays about literature in the 19th century and how science and scientific ideas and themes and technology started to be implemented in fiction and writing of the 19th century as
techno thrillers.
Yeah, as what was it called during the 19th century when technology started to, what was it called? The
Industrial Revolution.
Industrial Revolution. Yeah. So I'll pull some things out of this later in the episode, but I definitely agree. It's I didn't know it was one of the first, but makes sense.
I don't know when H.G. Wells came about and was doing his things, but that was sci-fi, and obviously like Jules Verne with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that was before this, I believe, but that was again, sci-fi. So outside of the sci-fi genre, like just a thriller genre that uses technology, I felt was a cool contrast for the religious aspects. It balanced it, because this could be easily, which a lot of vampire fiction has been in my opinion, too religious heavy. It's like almost boring, This follows Castlevania more of just like, fucking action and fun shit. And we have crucifixes and holy water. But I mean, I don't even remember if they said the name Jesus in this book.
I don't think so.
And if it was just like, when someone was dying a horrible death and they were blessing them or something, but it wasn't overly religious. We didn't have some priest saving the day or anything. It wasn't like The Exorcism. So I like that aspect where it's like, no, we're going to use real world technology to combat this evil, dark demon force. And I think that's cool as shit, man.
Welcome to Arcade Bookshop, where we talk about video games and their literary counterparts for all of you who love to play and to read. I'm Bryce, and I'm here with my pal and cousin-in-law, Caleb James. Today we're talking about Dracula by Bram Stoker, after our last episode where we talked about Castlevania 1 and 2 and a little bit of 3.
That introduction was both abrupt and startling. He just went real hard into it.
It was so startling that it startled my train of thought right out of my head.
You were discussing Dracula, and you, I imagine, had some opening remarks. If you don't know the opening remarks, we should just quit now.
Well, let's just dive back into what we were talking about. I just wanted to get the intro done after 20 minutes of talking.
You're almost as bad as I am on my podcast.
I know.
It's like, let's just go really long, and then we should probably introduce us.
I didn't think it would go that long, but
this is
it was
like,
a good
what,
conversation.
episode 10, 12, whatever episode this is. They should
Like
know who we are
15,
by now.
I think.
Yeah.
I haven't been keeping track, but yeah, there are so many ways to talk about this book. It's kind of crazy. And I'll start out by saying that both of us have read this book. We didn't read it for the podcast, but it's a decent size of a book. But I read it for my college class. I think it was, I don't know if it was my British Lit class or if it was, because I had a British Lit class, but I also had a class that was mostly British Lit, but was also just about, it might have been called Literature and Science in the 19th Century, actually. I think she named it after this book.
Well, that's pretty boring.
Are you kidding me? Was Dracula boring?
Yeah, some of it.
It was cool. We talked about Dracula and like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Dr. Jekyll and stuff like that, like haunting stuff, and we read like
Gothic fiction is what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Frankenstein.
We didn't read Frankenstein, but we did some Arthur Conan Doyle stuff. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
By the way, folks, if you want a deeper dive into this topic, you can listen to the Drunken Pen Writing podcast. I think it was probably 2 years ago now for Halloween. We covered, chapter by chapter. Like they had an episode every week on Dracula, if I remember correctly. So if you folks want to hear a shitty breakdown on that, you can listen to those episodes. I don't remember if we did a good job discussing that or not.
Do I need to give a synopsis of Dracula?
Not really, but maybe a better idea would be why we picked this as the companion to Castlevania, if it isn't too obvious.
Yeah, well, vampires.
Yep, that's it. Dracula. He's the main guy.
I could read the back of the book.
Yeah, just do that. That's quick. That's what I always do.
All right, let's see. This is my copy of Dracula. It's a Norton Critical Edition, edited by Nina Auerbach and David J. Skal.
To be fair, most people probably actually don't know the original story of Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula. They might know the movie version, the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula, which is closest to the book, or any of the other iterations of Dracula, like the Bela Lugosi Dracula, which most people are familiar with.
Yeah.
Not the same stories.
Right. So the back of my book says, it's not just a synopsis, but it says, when it was published in 1897, Dracula became one of the many contemporary titles that pitted humans against monsters. Robert Louis Stevenson, Rudyard Kipling, and H.G. Wells, among others, all published in the same genre at about the same time. Yet it is Dracula that readers cannot forget. The text of this Norton Critical Edition is that of the 1897 first edition. It is fully annotated. A rich selection of background and source materials is provided in 3 areas. Context, including probable inspirations for Dracula and the earlier works of James Malcolm Reimer and Emily Gerard. Real quick, I don't think this is going to give a synopsis, but I'll still read it. Also included are a discussion of Stoker's working notes for the novel and Dracula's Guest, the original opening chapter Dracula. Long story short, this copy of the book is actually really cool because you don't just get the Dracula story, the novel. You get Dracula's Guest, which is the way the book originally was originally opened,
which the editor made him cut, rightfully so, because it doesn't fit at all.
Yeah, and you get like essays and stuff on all the topics that Bram Stoker touches on and alludes to from the times that he was writing from. I remember when I had my class, when we talked about this, I was like, I couldn't believe all the things that are in this book. I don't remember everything from it. I actually do remember it being a little bit more boring than I thought it was going to be.
If we're going to go do a critical analysis, my main gripe with the whole book, which we covered on my podcast, was the repetitive nature near the end, where every chapter was reiterating stuff you already knew and heard.
Oh yeah, because the novel is like in epistolary form. It's all letters from
Different people, yeah.
Nina or
Newspaper clippings. I think at some point they record on the gramophone. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think so.
So gramophone recording. It's cool. I think it might have been the first epistolary novel I've actually read. But yeah, you get a lot of reiteration of stuff. You're like, all right, I get it, especially near the end. But for me, one of the best opening chapters of any novel. Like the opening, and even maybe it was the second chapter where we're in the castle. Cool as fuck. For just the people who do want the actual synopsis, you have Jonathan Harker, who he's an English, I don't know, works for a bank or something. Basically, Count Dracula wants to buy some property in England. Mm-hmm. That's what his plan is. His evil plan is actually to take over England, I believe, but you don't know that yet. So Jonathan Harker goes to Transylvania, and all the village people, they find out where he's going, and they're doing the crosses on their chest, and they're scared for him and all this stuff. He's like, what the fuck? Gets a really creepy stagecoach. Driving the coach. Takes him up. The coach can control wolves, which should be a giveaway just to go the fuck back, but he doesn't. He goes there, meets Dracula, who in this version, the original Dracula, kind of gray hair, a big mustache, short fat fingers, pointy teeth. Not the suave, Bela Lugosi, slick back, black hair Dracula, Though he does get younger as he gets, when he goes into England later and they see him in the street and stuff. This Dracula also he's not affected by sunlight the same. He doesn't burn up, so that's not one of the things. And also, I believe instead of garlic bulbs, it's garlic flowers that they use. They hang up as garlic flowers. I don't believe it's the actual bulbs of garlic, though they could have used the bulbs too. But Jonathan Harker, Dracula's creepy. His castle's run down and shitty. He tells him don't go to any of these rooms, and he's just like, okay. And Jonathan Harker's kind of an idiot for a while, and then he cuts himself shaving, and then Dracula comes out of nowhere and tries to he freaks out because he sees the blood. He's all horny for some blood. And then fortunately, Jonathan Harker had a crucifix on him, and he scared him off. And then he realized that guy didn't have a reflection in the mirror. That's weird. And then it comes to, it pops into his head finally, am I a prisoner here? Can I not leave? He can't leave. Eventually, he sees Dracula climbing down the castle like a lizard, which is one of my favorite scenes. It's so fucking cool and freaky. The beginning of this was my favorite. As it draws on, it gets a little boring, and then it has cool gothic elements and ethereal atmospheres and stuff. But it does have some stuff. It's like, I don't care. Like mainly the techno stuff, the science shit, I didn't care about. Speed things up. There's 3 scary vampire ladies that try to suck his blood in the place and eat him. Dracula comes in, throws a baby at them. They eat the baby. Horrific. Eventually, Jonathan Harker just jumps out the castle into the river. He ends up in Romania where he's sick. Mina Harper, his sweetheart from England, flies out there. Her buddy Lucy, who is a harlot, not a harlot, but she has a choice of men. There's a whole boy group here. They're after her. She picks one named Arthur. There's also Quincy Morris, the Texan, which Bram Stoker did not know how to write a Texan. Like, he didn't never met an American, clearly.
Yeah.
But he was one of the guys. And then Dr. Stewart, or is it Seward? Dr. Seward, he worked at the Institution for the Mentally Insane, where we have the famous Renfield. It's actually not that big of a deal in this book. Then you get Lucy, who Dracula, he fills up a bunch of 50 caskets full of dirt. He gets on a boat, ships himself to England. He eats everyone on the boat, basically. And then he starts feeding on Lucy, and I think she becomes the Bloofer lady, which is cool. Like, they got these newspaper clippings of this creepy lady that kids are finding in the because kids just wander cemeteries at night. And she's sucking their blood. She ends up dying. A series of unfortunate events happen. Lots of blood transfusions, which at the time was new in the new technology. Like 4 guys in a row just giving you blood transfusions does not work. There has to be blood type. Like, you can't just give blood transfusions. But back then you could, apparently. And then another, really to shorten things up, Lucy dies. Mina gets sick, but they do some fancy magic and hypnotize her. And since Dracula made her drink his blood, he could see out of her eyes, and there's like a telekinesis thing. So they know where Dracula's going. They fucking go hop back to his castle. Not a plane, a boat, I guess, or whatever. Train. I think it's a series of train adventures, actually. So they go to Transylvania. I completely forgot the coolest character, Van Helsing. Dr. Van Helsing comes in to help with Lucy and Mina, and he's crazy as shit, but he loves killing vampires, apparently. Mina Harker's also an actual girl boss in this, as she's the one that figures a lot of things out and is actually smart, and the guys are fucking dunderheads. And it's very interesting to see how that's written from this time period, that they would have her be the cool one. But that actually goes into the modern horror trope of, the chaste, pristine virgin, quote unquote, is, always the one who lives in horror movies,
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the cliche, is the sex addicted teenage youths are the ones that always get killed by Jason and Freddy and all this stuff. But it's always the good girl that lasts. Well, that's how, Lucy was always with all these guys. So she ends up getting killed. But Mina, who is a good girl, ends up living. But they go back and Van Helsing, he kills the vampire ladies. Dracula gets killed. Quincy Morris dies. And everybody lives happily ever after. The end. That was a little longer than I wanted to. But there are a lot of cool elements in there. Like there's scenes of beheading and lots of crosses through the heart, stakes through the heart. And all the, most of the typical vampire tropes are brought, I don't know if Bram Stoker created them, but he definitely utilized them because he did a lot of Transylvania folklore research for this. Like a lot of, like Vlad the Impaler was obviously one of the, because he was technically the Dracula, the real Dracula. So he was an inspiration, but he actually did a lot of research on folklore and stuff around the area to get the vampire story. Because he wasn't the first vampire story.
Right.
He was just the first memorable one.
Do you know who the first...
I have a Penny Dreadful collection over there, and it has a story called The Vampire, and I think it's spelled with a Y, and I believe that's the first one. And that, I want to say it was 1700s or maybe early 1800s. I don't know who wrote that. I have to go.
Well, yeah, there's... I don't know if it's actually clear what the first vampire story was, but I know there's that one, and there's Varney the Vampire, which was I'm pretty sure that came first, before Dracula at least. I'm not sure if it was the original vampire, because that's also with a Y instead of an I.
The consensus is John Pauldin's 1819 short story, The Vampire. That's the one I said.
Okay.
That was made into a stage play in Scotland, I believe. And that one, I mean, again, because when you get into folklore, it gets a little iffy because there's a lot of folklore that was written down around, like the Grimm brothers and stuff. So vampires were a thing for a long time. It's just who actually wrote the first story. I'm sure that guy wasn't the first, but that was probably the first popular rendition.
Yeah. Right.
Or one of the first popular.
What for you is the biggest thing that stands out for you in Dracula, in terms of, like, we started off talking about political themes and nuances in contemporary literature. What do you think is the most prevalent idea in Bram Stoker's writing? His
view on gender and sex, because I felt like it was very modern for its time. Like I said, Mina was the girl boss. Like, she was coming up with so many things. There was, like, she was figuring shit out, and then the guys were just like, oh, I think they even say, like, a line in the book, something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines like, we would be lost without you, something like that. It's like, basically, they couldn't have done any of the, even Van Helsing, they couldn't have done what they were doing and get Dracula without her assistance. Like, she was the catalyst for being able to figure all this stuff out, and she was a strong character.
Maybe I'm wrong about this and remembering incorrectly, but isn't part of her intelligence because she's linked to Dracula?
That's later on when they use it, because they hypnotize her and they're able to. Yeah. Because Dracula could see out of her eye. He used her as a spy, but before that, even she was figuring stuff out, and then
because she was just a smart person, I guess. Yeah. Her character.
But then when she was taken over by Dracula, she was basically tricking Dracula. She was like, "Hey, I know this fucker could see what I'm seeing, and he's using me. So how could we use that to get him?" And that's, again, I don't know if that was exactly her idea from the get-go, but I'm pretty sure I know she was willing to do it, but she was all in on getting this guy. Like, she was the original, what is it, Sydney from Scream?
Yeah. Yeah.
She was like the original badass chick, at least in my opinion. That's what I got from it. What about you?
I think I tend to look at, when I read literature, I tend to look at it from a broader view, I guess. I definitely pick up on the gender stuff a little bit, but it's not my first instinct, especially when I'm reading this, just like enjoying the story for the most part. I look at the events and stuff more than the characters, I guess, which is kind of the opposite of the point of literature. But but I think it's both in my critical edition and in my Literature and Science, the 19th Century book. They talk a lot about what was going on in terms of, like, British culture and, like, the actual British Empire at the time, and what something like Dracula represents, what a creature like that represents as a threat to the empire and the community when they're trying to grow, and it's like a parasite to the endeavors of the country. So a word that actually I have a variety of words that that go for this, go in with this idea. But so the first one is atavism or atavism or something like that. Yeah, have you heard of that?
No.
It's the reversion to ancient things. So at this point in British history, it's it's like the Industrial Revolution and stuff. They've colonized their the community is like bolstering. It's getting bigger and more about business, and like they just keep going up. And then, but underneath that, there's always the threat of things going sour and something evil or parasitic, like a monster or a Dracula or something equivalent to a Dracula coming to ruin it all.
Mm-hmm.
And the real thing behind that is just people like the poor people that actually result from the Industrial Revolution. And this is mostly in fiction, but like the creatures that are products of that kind of progress. And another idea that comes out of that is the idea of like degeneration. So they've worked so hard to get where they've gone, and they start getting nervous and worried that there's going to be people who threaten that like purity they've found. And that's like think of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because Mr. Hyde's the dark one, right? Yeah. So like Dr. Jekyll is a doctor, he's like reputable and all this stuff, but then he also has this dark side that's like tainting the community and murderous and gruesome and ruining the reputation that they've worked so hard to achieve. I don't know if any of that resonates with you. I have more, but I don't know what's going on.
Well, the story, I mean, it's not a timeless story, but anytime there's a major change in society, so the Industrial Revolution, the modern technological revolution, even if you go to the Renaissance period, you always have stories because, like you said, it sprouts up from fear. So you're going to have the fear of change, of what's to come and what's new, and then also the fear of reverting back to what was previous or degrading. So if you have, say, in this case, England's growing, but they're not, at the time of this story, the worldwide dominant force they once were. So they're focusing on this Industrial Revolution of building up a different kind of enterprise. So instead of taking over countries and making their money that way, now they're going to make it through, fabrication. And everything was dirty in England at this time, by the way. Everything was black and soot colored. But so you had, and obviously this goes into classism too. So you think of Dickens and, Tale of Two Cities and things like that. So you have the lower class, the working labor class, who are actually making all this possible. And then you have the higher up rich class. But the rich class, they fear that something is going to stall the progression. It's going to stall, and they're going to revert back to not being paupers because they probably weren't poor to begin with. But for some reason, there's always this fear that things will go back to the old times, that everyone will be more equal, and then we won't be so rich. Whereas the working class, they fear the progression because, we're working in factories and things really suck. If this keeps expanding, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And that's when the two ideologies always butt heads. And then you have kind of a revolution. So when you get stories like this, you always get, like you said, the parasitic, what's coming in to take us back to what was old. And then you also have the what was old, might have not been good. We need to keep moving forward. And this, like I said, the techno thriller. So you have the technology is saving the day, but at the same time, I don't know if this actually goes back to wanting to stop progress. I don't know if this is that kind of story, because what I got from it is Dracula represents the old, the ancient, that's trying to, take over England and bring back whatever his fucking evil domain is, his worldview and how he controls things. So that would be the olden times, and it's like a story of how progress is going to save the day. That's what I got from it anyway.
I mean, when you think of England at this time, I think it was still very, very much one type of person or one type of people. I mean, economics aside, but eventually, because of the Industrial Revolution, I think. I mean, I don't know history very well, but I'm pretty sure that around this time, was when England started to become more of like how the U.S. is like a melting pot. Like,
Yeah.
they started to get more of a variety in their culture and their
Which they also fought against.
right.
Well,
So it's
some people fought against.
so that's what I see the whole Dracula thing being.
You
like,
do
because-
get a undertone of like saving the purity of the race. For in this instance, it's the English.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, we got to save, Mother England. It's got to stay the same. We can't have these outside forces.
Right. And like I see that because like the parts in the middle of the book or towards the end probably, I can't remember exactly where it is, but when Dracula leaves the castle and goes to London and he starts messing with the women and stuff like that. So I guess that's where I'm like getting the parasitic idea from, because he's going there manipulating everybody in London when they're all just trying to like build everything up. And this is where I like that the writing is so focused on the story more than anything else, because that's the way fiction should be.
Mhm.
Because you don't necessarily have to pick up on that, but it's cool if you do, because it's there and there's evidence that it is there, that it may have been deliberate. I don't know if he's ever spoken on it or anything, but then you can also think about how, like in terms of like the generation, how Mina had to get all the transfusions and everything. Like, she's the smartest person in the book, and then Dracula messes with her, and she needs transfusions to survive, and then she gets like 4 other dumb guys' blood in her body.
Yeah.
Which scientifically would probably kill her.
Well, yeah, but just as a metaphor, the uneducated class has to hold up the smarter, the more intelligent class that runs things. So she needed dumb guy blood.
Right.
You know what I liked about fiction from this time period, though, like the English fiction, was that it always touched on barbarism.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you think of like Robert E. Howard's work where he goes full on barbarism, but basically, you have Dracula, who's just he's just the evil force. He's coming, he's wrecking shit, he's taking women, he's just doing whatever he wants. So he is the barber, or the barbarian. He is the barbarism incarnate. Yeah, he's the barber. He did get a nice haircut eventually.
He does a wonderful job.
Yeah. Just don't let him cut you on accident. He'll suck on your neck for a long time. But you had that as always a stark contrast with any of these English, from Dickens till just anything up through the early 1900s, is just the fact that you have this like, the snobby, classy, like, I'm a businessman, you can't pull my pants down. Like, you can't, there's such a strict way to live. And actually it probably started even in like Victorian England, but it kind of mellowed out. But it's just, even to this day, the English have this kind of attitude where it's like, I wear a suit and tie. I have to, even though most people probably don't anymore, but still, just like that idea of having to be like a certain level of class, you have to always keep it, maintain at all times. Mm-hmm. But then you got Dracula just coming in stunting with his pimp hat, and he looks classy, but he's just sucking blood and turning into wolves and weird shit. It's just like, no, this guy's just completely disrupting your fake bullshit existence that you're just trying to manufacture. It's like people that just like act like it's the time period. It's like people didn't poop then, Yeah. It's like, we don't talk about nasty things like that. We don't. They're animal instincts. They have to. That's why like Jack the Ripper is so famous and becomes such a thing, is because your animalistic instincts, they pushed down so far that they acted like it just didn't exist. But then you have like the barbarism of fucking Dracula coming in and just unfolding and everything. But that's like most of the stories at that time. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. He's a doctor. He's sophisticated. He's smart. He does everything the way you're supposed to. But then Mr. Hyde's a crass, dirty asshole. And it's like, I love those stories. Like, they're great that they just, I don't know. They just always capture my imagination, because I just always picture these snooty people, and then somebody just comes and pies them in the face, except for a pie's an axe, like, or a dirty vampire. Wonderful.
Yeah, and from there, I guess I don't know if you want to, but we could talk about sexuality and gender more if you wanted to. Because I know there's actually an essay in my critical edition about feminism.
Well, so one of the main themes of this book, which we still use in horror to this day, the aversion to lust and perversion. I didn't mean to rhyme there. So lust and perversion, and obviously in this time it's like very minimal. It's not overtly sexual or anything, but you think of your Friday the 13th, it's always really raunchy. But back then, it was done in a classier way. But the themes of that is like Dracula represents the perversion of man and, man's nature, how man fights against his baser, like I had discussed earlier, his basic animalistic nature. And Dracula, he is one who just does whatever he wants and seduces women and feeds on women, literally. He represents that perversion that we, as a sophisticated society, civilized society, have overcome, supposedly, but it's always there just underneath the skin is this, I need to do some bad shit. That even goes back to like all the classic biblical stories like Adam and Eve and everything like that, because there is a lot of religious overtones in this. Though, like I said before, I love how it's not overtly in your face. But yeah, you get a lot of those sexualized natures and how it's bad, okay? Bad stuff. You shouldn't be doing that, okay?
Have you ever heard of, I didn't want to go too far away from the sexuality thing, right? But have you ever heard of the term physiognomy or physiognomy?
Yeah, it's a word I always read and never could say out loud.
Okay. That was something that struck me like super, I don't want to say racist, but in some terms it is. It's definitely like proven to be incorrect, like scientifically disproven. But
well, like women having smaller brains and stuff.
Just people in general, like the shape. I think physiognomy specifically is the shape of someone's skull determining their personality and the shape of their face, the look of their face, and everything. This part in particular, I think it more addresses the idea of like Dracula, I guess, as a monster that represents something larger in the community or in the
patriarchy.
Yeah. I'm reading from the Literature and Science in the 19th Century book. And this is stuff that I underlined when I was reading it for college. But so this paragraph says, if we examine a number of criminals, we shall find that they exhibit numerous anomalies in the face, skeleton, and various psychic and sensitive functions, so that they strongly resemble primitive races. It was these anomalies that first drew my father's attention. I'm not sure what they're talking about, but drew my father's attention to the close relationship between the criminal and the savage and made him suspect that criminal tendencies are of atavistic origin.
There's still people who believe that nonsense, too.
Yeah, I know. It's...
there's a subsect of science that, because you said like about racism, where they thought Africans were actually stupider, just less intelligent because of how their face shape was. And I don't know if they tried to compare them to cavemen or whatever, but and I want to say maybe some like Mongolian sects and stuff like that. It's like, oh, because they look this way, they're obviously inferior beings. They're stupid. It's just like doesn't make any sense. Usually it's just because they're live in a village or a tribe and they're just not educated to modern levels. But that doesn't mean they're stupid by any means. That doesn't mean they're less intelligent or incapable of learning. But that's the way that they viewed those people, and you still have like white supremacists and stuff that think that way.
Right, and I think it goes into like how you were talking about the culture being like pretending that our basic
animal instincts,
our animal instinct kind of thing, like those things, pretending those things aren't there. It's kind of like that fear of the other thing that was prevalent this time also. And I think this, I wish I had reread this or had the time to do that, but just, thinking back on it, it's you can think of when Dracula when he's in London, or even when you're looking at the different characters that are like pursuing Lucy or whatever, and the people that gave blood to Mina, those guys, because one of those guys was what's his name,
Quentin Morris,
the Texan.
Yeah,
he's a foreigner because he's an American in London. The whole face shape thing, the discomfort with of people who look different and who you are unpredictable. You don't see them very often, because
Quincy Morris, not
Quincy. I got Quentin on the brain because it sounds.
exact same thing. I was like, that's not right.
I was gonna say Percy, and I was like, that's not Harry Potter.
I hope I didn't say Quentin at the beginning when I gave my synopsis, but I think I did.
Whatever.
Quincy's a stupid name anyway. It's definitely not a Texas name.
I was gonna say, but the whole it goes into the whole like being uncomfortable being around people that you aren't familiar with, people who aren't high class, pretending to be high class. And there's more that goes into to describing these types of people as monsters.
Jesus.
So this is another paragraph. It's going to cut in. You're not going to understand it right away, but thus was explained the origin of the enormous jaws, strong canines, prominent zygomae, and I'm not saying that right, and strongly developed orbital arches, which he had so frequently remarked in criminals. For these peculiarities are common to carnivores and savages who tear and devour raw flesh.
That's a lot more eloquent than the traditional sloping forehead, slack jaw, like they do in a lot of old fiction.
Thus also it was easy to understand why the span of the arms in criminals so often exceeds the height. For this is characteristic of apes, whose forelimbs are used in walking and climbing. The other anomalies exhibited by criminals, the scanty beard as opposed to the general hairiness of the body, prehensile foot, diminished number of lines in the palm of the hand, cheek pouches, enormous development of the middle incisors, and frequent absence of the lateral ones, flattened nose, and angular or sugarloaf form of the skull. Common to criminals and apes, the excessive size of the orbits. Oh my gosh, it just goes on and on. It's like it's just so much. And it goes on to talk about born criminals. Oh yeah, it's just.
So basically, if you look at all ape, if you look at all ape-like or just non-traditional white person, you are
exactly
a monster, a criminal, a vagrant of ill intent. Any number of adjectives could be thrown in there probably. Well, obviously, fucking endless descriptors. Sugarloaf, though, what does a sugarloaf look like?
I don't know. I have no picture in my head of what that...
Just bread? Let me look that up.
Breadhead?
Sugar loaf. It is a foodstuff. Let's see what we got. That can't be right. That looks like a big phallus. Are their heads looking like giant phallus? Oh, show me a mountain. Sugar loaf food. Do that. It still looks like a big phallus. Here's the less wiener-like looking one. Is a traditional... So their head... Yeah, I guess
like when people say your head comes to a point or something like that.
Yeah, almost like a cone head. That's what a sugar loaf apparently was.
That's so weird.
I would have never thought that was a food. That looks like one of those incense things, like not the sticks, but the
cones.
Yeah. A sugar loaf. I kind of want a sugar loaf now. I wonder how you make it. Too late.
Anyway, we were talking about sexuality for a minute. I don't know if you care about that anymore. But...
I mean, if you had some, I don't have much to discuss on.
Okay. There was an essay.
Bram Stoker might have been gay.
Talk about that.
I forgot about that.
Let's hear.
I don't know why. There's one thing in my very vague research that stuck in my brain was that apparently Bram Stoker might have been gay.
What's the evidence?
I don't know. Maybe he had letters to a lover or something, but they always said everyone was gay back then. Mm-hmm. Like anytime, I don't know if that's like a modern thing we're throwing on old writers, but even going back to, let's say, like Moby Dick, apparently man snuggling was a thing that was popular a long time ago, maybe because there wasn't heat. Like, if you just go to bed with your buddy, like you're just like, I don't know if they're actually holding each other, but like, very close to another man and it's fine. It's just body heat and just like different aspects that we would consider gay now or homoerotic behavior back then might have, like maybe kissing a man to say hello or something. I don't know if that's an example, but that would be something that like, oh, that wasn't weird back then. You know how it used to be you dress boys in pink. It was fine. That wasn't considered gay. And then it's, blue was the gay color. Then it switched. But where am I going? So basically, I don't know what the evidence that Bram Stoker was gay, but they said he was. And a lot of guys back then, especially writers, wrote very gay letters to their friends, but they weren't actually gay. They just sounded like, I love you and I miss you. And, just things that were like, that sounds kind of gay. Like that's your lover, but that doesn't mean they were actually lovers. So I don't know if Bram Stoker was a gay man. I don't know what evidence. I don't know if you looked up any evidence. But...
Well, not specifically. I know he worked at a theater, I think, while he was writing this.
So that doesn't help his cause. But then, does that mean Shakespeare was a gay man?
I feel like I've heard something about that. Maybe not, though.
They don't even know if Shakespeare was real, but they're going to say he's a gay man.
Oh, that's probably a good
Anyone
point.
who
I
works
don't
in
know.
theater is gay, so I mean, it checks out. Oh, this just straight up says Stoker himself was a closeted gay man who pined for affection from both his friends, mentors, and possible lovers Oscar Wilde and Walt Whitman. Whitman was
Wait.
gay too? That's a
My time is.
that's from Salon.
What was? Wait, when was Walt Whitman? When was Walt Whitman around?
During Bram Stoker's life.
It was the same time. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it was. It was like the 1812 version of Leaves of Grass.
Yeah.
That is like the original one. That's weird. I for some reason I was thinking Walt Whitman was older than that, like from a different time. Yeah, but I actually read that. I think he got, I think he got inspiration from watching the women the actresses at the theater.
Yeah.
I think he was inspired. He got inspiration from the way they acted about certain things, for the way the women started acting, like when they were affected by Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
Like their rage and stuff, because I think they like got screwed over with bad roles all the time, and they would do them because they had to, and then they just like get like super like monstrously pissed, and I think he used that as see that's where it's like he talks about a lot of like very progressive points, but there's also a degree where the progressiveness back then is a little bit different. Because it was
very dated.
Yeah, it's like still kind of new, and he's like being progressive, but nowadays you'd be like
A bigot.
yeah,
Or like racist or misogynistic or just any of the.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess he's just like he took their rage and made them use that for the characters, turned into monsters from Dracula.
Nice. Can I read some of these article headlines because they're pretty hilarious?
Yeah.
Here's Mediums. The Queer Life of Bram Stoker. That's basic. Here's Salon. The Queer Horror of Dracula. Tumblr. I like this one. It's my favorite. So just how gay was Bram Stoker? Not that there's anything wrong with that. Reddit, it's just straight up that Bram Stoker, author of Dracula, was a closeted homosexual. Project Muse, A Wild Desire Took Me. Wild as an Oscar Wilde. The Homoerotic History of Dracula. Ooh, this is a good one. Film Days, Queer Coding in Bram Stoker's Dracula. So, and these are all about 2021 to 2022. These articles came out. So there must have been a gay Bram Stoker renaissance. So people just wanted him to be super gay at some point.
And this is where it just pisses me off. Because, like, I'm fine with him being gay. I don't care. That's great.
But somehow that makes Dracula better.
Yeah.
That makes the story of
you're
Dracula
insulting the history of, because I don't think he wanted that to come out.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. If he was a closeted gay man,
he did not want that to be part of the book.
Yeah, so all the stuff that is making Dracula awesome now, and people were digging and finding in Dracula about pro queerness and all this stuff, it wasn't supposed to be there because obviously a closeted gay man's not going to put that in there and out himself. So
yeah,
you're just reading into it, and it's not there. It's not meant to be there.
Yeah, it's just frustrating. It's and that's where
that's no better than saying, finding out an author said some racist shit, so you go through their work and try to find any instance that will prove they're racist, even if it's not there. Like you just, they got to be racist because they believe this, even though it's a character. Again, these are fictional characters, not the author. None of these are the author. They might share the author's opinions, but usually, especially in the case of Dracula, not.
Yeah.
So I hate when people do that. It's really irritating. Because I always think, like, what if I have a story come out and I have a racist character and they're going to think I'm racist because the character is racist? That's stupid.
Yeah, and I'm sure everyone could argue, and they probably do, that like, he would have liked to be able to be open about it.
Yeah.
And maybe he's being subtle in a way that he knew wouldn't immediately come out as, like...
But if he was obsessed with Oscar Wilde was... arrested for being, what did they call that back then? Not delinquency, degeneracy, or
probably
perversion or something. But basically, just being gay. You got arrested for being gay.
Yeah.
But he was not shy about who he was, so it's not like Bram Stoker didn't have. Oh shit! It's not. Bryce got a drinking problem over there. He just dumped beer all over him. But it's not like Bram Stoker didn't have a model for how to behave if you wanted to be out, or as out as you could be at that time without being lynched. But still, it's just like, I don't think people need to be diving so deep into the work and try to like pull stuff that's not there.
Yeah.
And I didn't read any of these articles. Maybe they make very good, valid points. Maybe I'm wrong and Bram Stoker hit a bunch of gay stuff in there. I just didn't get it personally.
Yeah. I didn't. I mean, the only thing you could say is you could talk about, I don't remember. Did Dracula bite Jonathan?
No, I don't think
Because
so.
it was the succubi that did that. The
I
women.
didn't think anyone bit Jonathan, did they? I'm always confused because in Dracula, the original universe, you do not become a vampire when you get bit. You only become a vampire when you suck the blood of a vampire, right? Or you die from being sucked upon too much.
I think so.
So you could be bit and just like lose blood, but still be okay. It's not like,
Yeah, because Mina ended up being, she only started turning.
She started turning towards the end.
But so this is where I'm like, I'm mixing up.
But it was almost like she was possessed because once
Right.
Dracula died, she went back to normal.
Right, and this is where I'm mixing up the movie and the book a little bit. I'm not sure where I'm like going.
Well, I know Lucy was growing teeth near the end, and then she obviously died and came back as a vampire. So I don't know if it's like an infection. It's never explained.
But I remember that Mina didn't. I remember in the movie that Mina didn't. She like got feverish, but she didn't start changing in any way until because she did drink some of his blood, right?
Yeah, he made her
like
drink
cut his body or whatever and put her head to it.
Gross.
Yeah, I know that's different. I'm pretty sure that he didn't bite Jonathan. I think he was attracted to his blood, and then he got, you said earlier, he got like shoved away by the crucifix and everything. And later on, Jonathan ended up going into that room where the succubi were, the three vampire women. I think that's where he did get bitten. And
then he threw that Dracula threw a baby in them.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I mean,
he threw a baby in there, and then they went for the baby, and I was like, ugh. And he's like, get out of here, bitches. And I was like, whoa, Dracula, you're harsh, dude.
But I don't remember what happens to Jonathan after that.
He jumps out of a window and lands in a river and gets real sick and goes into some hospital in Romania.
Oh, he goes to a hospital?
I don't know how they recovered his journal. I guess it was just on him.
So I don't remember how he gets... I feel terrible not remembering half of the story and doing the podcast about it, but I don't remember... I'm almost certain they bit him. I don't remember how he recovered from that, unless it was just
He's
a case...
in the hospital.
Yeah, but you can't just recover by going to the hospital from...
Did Van
vampirism.
Helsing visit him, maybe?
I think he probably did, but I don't know if that just resolved it just like that.
Well, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, so he gets bit by one of the women. He gets a real bad case of syphilis, and that was incurable at the time. So I think he just probably eventually died of syphilis like 20 years later.
There's a happy ending here, though.
Yeah, but we didn't see what happened after all that stuff. We didn't see the, PTSD.
Yeah, but we're talking about the story in the text that we're given.
Well, as the text that was given, Jonathan had a bad case of syphilis, but he didn't know it because it was dormant for the time being because he was bitten by vampires, and they're very gross. They bite anybody. Just saying. And then...
In the text that we're given, we know that he has syphilis.
Oh, big time. Big time. And then obviously Mina's going to get it. Well, she got bit by Dracula, but she would have got it regardless because she was with Jonathan. Probably on their wedding night. I don't think syphilis is actually mentioned in here.
I was going to say, when did that even come around?
Oh, it was big. Tuberculosis was big too. The consumption, the fainting woman's disease, I think they called it. Like women would get tuberculosis and faint, and they're just like, damn women, always fainting. There had to be some kind of allegory for syphilis. How do you spell syphilis? I spelled it right. Get off mic. How Dracula draws on our biggest health fears. The fact that Dracula particularly targeted female victims adds a sexual element to the mix. It may connote the spread of syphilis. I remember actually reading, though, that there was like supposed to be a connection made about, syphilis, because that was something that a lot of people were dying from and suffering from at the time because there was no cure. And, Dracula, being the dirty man he was, it goes with the perversion and the lust. How if you're not chaste and do all that's right and only have sex with your partner after you're married, you will get syphilis and you will die and somebody will bite your neck. So there's just as many, if not more, articles about Dracula and syphilis than there was on gay Bram Stoker. Interesting. Apparently there was a lot of syphilis being written about it. The Contagious Disease Act, originally issued in 1864, enforced strict regulations that any woman suspected of infection would undergo a violating and painful medical examination, which was a horrific invasion of the female body. The government's attempt to control the spread of venereal disease resulted in widespread genital inspection. In Dracula, medical examination dangerously hovers on the moral boundary of woman being undressed scientifically versus that of an erotic and perverted manner. So, that was a big component of the book that I totally missed. I don't remember the syphilis stuff at all.
I don't either.
I wasn't making. I kind of I briefly thought about it as jokes, but I didn't think that was actually a big component of the book. But it makes sense, especially with all the scientific testing
yeah,
and
definitely.
all the examining. There's a lot of examining and transfusions and shit too. So that dirty Van Helsing, he was up in there a lot. He was doing a lot of, I'm going to go check on the patient. You just checked on her. I'm going to check on her. He walks upstairs unbuckling his belt. I don't know. I don't think belt buckles were invented yet.
Oh, yeah. Industrial Revolution. They didn't figure out belt buckles yet.
Actually, I think they did invent belt buckles, but they did not have the loops on the pants.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure belt buckles were invented before pant loops.
Did you
1922, the belt loop was invented.
Oh, so yeah, afterwards.
Stupid.
That's crazy.
What an inconvenience. Like you're just,
My belt keeps going up over my pants.
as they always say, the belt holds up your pants, but the pants hold up your belt.
Do they say that?
Yeah, it works together. That is I'm pretty sure, I might be incorrect, but I'm pretty sure that was always the selling point of belts and pants together. Big belt and big pants, they had a collaboration a long time ago, and it's been going gangbusters.
You can't have one without the other. Well, you can.
Yeah, obviously. For a long time they did. And it was probably really irritating. I'm going to do that one day. I'm just going to put my belt over my pants and see how well it holds it up.
Before we end this show, I want to talk at all about Dracula's Guest, the introduction that was originally in the beginning.
I didn't read it.
Oh, you didn't read it at all?
No, I started to, and I was like, this is stupid. And I read about it, and it was just they said not only was it cut because it didn't really go along with Dracula, it's written in a different style, but it also just didn't fit with any part of the lore, really. Like, I think it's Jonathan Harker in a cemetery or something, and it doesn't even work as like a standalone story either. Like, it's just not, I don't know, it just wasn't good, I guess.
I'm like skimming it right now. Yeah, I don't know. It looks like they're kind of referring to the land around where the castle is.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the superstition around all of it.
It just works way better when Jonathan Harker arrives in Transylvania and goes to Dracula's castle. That's a lot better than him wandering around for endless amount of time beforehand.
Yeah.
Like, why is he in a cemetery? It doesn't make sense.
It does sort of remind me of the segue between Castlevania 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Like that little bit of information you get like from the manual or whatever. I don't know. In my skimming just now, it's what it sounded like, but I didn't read it, so I could just be pulling that out of my ass.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, how about we end the episode on a better note? Our likes and dislikes of the book and our official rating.
Yeah.
I gave this a solid 4 out of 5. I like this.
I thought you were gonna say 4 out of 10.
No.
I liked it when I read it. It was definitely, and honestly, getting to read Dracula in a college course was pretty fucking awesome. I do get held back by the boring letters.
Yeah.
Like because it's an epistolary novel. And like,
we didn't actually discuss this. I'm pretty sure I discussed it when I covered this book, but I was always very interested in, I would say, fiction before 1920. It was usually very established who was telling the story or how the story came to be. So in this case, you get the story through letters. Like, it had to be realistic. Frankenstein, there were letters and stuff. Like, there always had to be some kind of way the story is getting to the reader. I am the narrator and I am telling you the story. Or, I found a document and here's the story.
Yeah, like these letters they're all being read by Jonathan Hart. Like the letters and the gramophone recordings of Van Helsing and stuff, they're like everything's being interpreted through Jonathan Harker, right?
Yeah, so you have to know as the reader who is writing these letters or who is telling the story, and even to a degree sometimes who is receiving the story. So modern fiction, we don't worry about that. And I always like catch myself like, wait, if people read the story, are they going to wonder who the fuck's telling the story?
Yeah.
Because there's no narrator really. It's just me as the author writing a story. I don't think about it. But then I was like, well, calm down. Most people do this now. But it always throws me off because I'm like, they're going to think I'm a phony because they don't know who's telling the story. How did the story come to be? But it does help with the immersion when you know like who's telling the story. But it's hard to do that now, I think, without it sounding kind of hokey or using one of these devices that have been done a million times.
I know, is you don't want to be like gimmicky, but you also don't want to be, like we were talking about earlier, you don't want to be one of those people who's writing things like everybody else is in a way that ends up being ultimately not very interesting.
But then you see what happens like with the movie genre where the found footage movies, like, this movie exists because we found footage, and then it got so oversaturated. It's just stupid.
Exactly.
And it sucked. You could do the same thing with epistolary or any other form of writing. It's just very hard to get a nice, unique tale told under your belt without sounding like everyone else.
Yeah.
if you were trying to use one of these methods. Or you could just have the unreliable narrative. I mean, we don't have to go into all that stuff, but it's just, I always think that was very like interesting how old-timey books, it was like classic lit, it is very established who is telling you the story and how the story came to be.
You know what you should do? You should do something that nobody else has ever done before when you're writing, and make it more interesting.
I was actually thinking about that earlier today. It was like, how could I create a new genre? That seems a little lofty, but maybe just telling a story that hasn't been told in a certain way. How? Well, everything's been told.
Yeah.
Even books that, like, I'm pretty sure there's whole novels written in text form now.
You know what I worry about that I feel like we shouldn't even go into, but I'm going to do it because I already started talking.
What?
The paranoid in me says that. So I've always heard this whole thing about how everything is a remake. And there's like a YouTube series called Everything's a Remake.
Uh-huh.
And everybody says that every story has been told by Shakespeare already.
True.
Like, everything is just a variation of a Shakespearean drama.
Which was probably a variation of a Greek drama. Like.
Right. So that's implying that everything has already been done. So
And better.
Not that not that anyone's like giving up or anything, but what if they keep telling us? What if the propaganda is
Big lit.
Big lit.
Big lit.
Is that everything is a remix, but in reality, that's just giving us the mindset that everything is a remix, when in reality there are topics and methods of writing that we just decide subconsciously not even to explore because we think that everything has already been done.
I mean, all you have to do is read the work of David Foster Wallace, Alan Moore, Daniel Lusky, who did House of Leaves. Those three guys right there, you read their work, you say, oh, there's still things being written, or people, in the case of David Foster Wallace, he's deceased, but things are still being written or have been written recently that are completely different from anything that's existed. So you can still do it. Like House of Leaves, especially. Before that, I never read a book like that.
That's true.
Never heard of, seen a story like that. You can say maybe it's garbage or it's annoying, but it's different, which is very important. Alan Moore, like I said, he does a lot of, in all his fiction anyway, I think it's all written in different ways. And granted, he's doing a lot of remixing himself on James Joyce and probably Shakespeare, but he at least puts his own unique twist on it. But you could do your own thing. You could do something different. You know who I go with? I always forget this guy's name. But a writer I recently, I think last year or a year before, picked up some of his books was Paul Jameson. He has a book called Life of Maggot I read. And it's written in a post-apocalyptic medieval style with a lot of Celtic fairy tale or fairy style fiction. And I'd never read anything like that before. And he has another book, which it came out before. I think it's called Belljar or Nightjar. I think it's called Nightjar. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's called Nightjar. I haven't read that one yet, but I think it's written in the same way. And it's like, oh, this is a guy I found. I think he's just an indie author, but like I really enjoyed Life of Maggot because I never read anything like that before. It's like, oh, here's a guy that's actually writing in a style, especially in a contemporary writer who's writing in a style I've never read before. Not saying that style might not have existed, like somebody else might have written stuff like that, but as far as me reading, I've never come across that. So that gave me hope and inspired me to think there's still things and ways you can write and things you can write about that haven't been done yet. You just have to really dig deep and, mainly if you just find your own unique author's voice, that usually helps because nobody's going to write like you if you're honest with yourself because you're the only you.
Right.
Unless you got a twin, a genetic twin.
What do you think Bram Stoker does uniquely that nobody else does?
I mean, it's hard to say because there's so many imitators after him, but
Right.
if you just go
Or
up
at
to
the
when,
time,
at the time, atmosphere, I would say. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was atmospheric, but not. I don't think like this. It's hard because I haven't read a lot of the horror and stuff at the time that came out at that time.
Or
but
do you think he didn't do it? Didn't like make it super unique about his style?
If you read this. Like just I don't know, say you read a chapter of this and a chapter of any other Victorian horror or Gothic horror, it probably doesn't stand out as something unique in my opinion. Like Edgar Allan Poe, you read that, you're like, that's unique, that's Poe, like
Yeah.
But if I read Bram Stoker and you didn't tell me it was Bram Stoker and I didn't have the name Dracula or any of the characters, I'd be like, I don't know who wrote this.
Yeah, and I don't think he really had anything else that...
Nothing. I mean, I think he had other work, but it wasn't anything that... Like, Mary Shelley wasn't anything people cared about.
Right.
a lot of the writers of that era were writing like the other writers of that era. It was more about the style, which is why you had a lot of people come along and do away with the flowery prose and the very strict way of writing. Like we talked about the epistolary and who's telling the story. We had a lot of the postmodern movement basically is like, hey, I'm going to tell a story however the fuck I want. I'm going to be a, Bill Faulkner and just have stream of consciousness upon stream of consciousness. Be a James Joyce and have a whole book that it took 17 years to write and nobody can read it. Like I just do stupid shit like that. But at the time, other than Edgar Allan Poe, and even him, he was inspired by Lord Byron, I think. So he was probably writing a lot of his stuff in the vein of someone else. And all these people, to a degree, wrote in some sense with inspiration from Shakespeare. He was the big one at the time. And then Shakespeare, like I said, the Greek dramas and even the Roman tragedies and your Dantes and your Virgils, and I don't think Dante was out before Shakespeare. That's around the same time. But Virgil, Horace, like any of these people that came out, previous, Shakespeare got his inspiration from. So it's like nobody's actually original, unless you're the first person who ever wrote anything.
God
was the original. You don't even know if he was the first God. We don't know.
Well, I give this, for the sake of being different, 4.1 transfusions out of 5.
I would have gave this a 5 if it was like 10 chapters shorter. Like if they took out some of the middle.
Yeah. I started to say some of the boring part. I think some of the parts I really didn't care about were like before shit was going down and we were just hearing about like the women and stuff. Like not that
there was a lot of talk about just, almost like Pride and Prejudice shit.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah, that's where I was going.
I'm gonna suitor. Oh, you have so many suitors, Lucy. Let's break every single character trait each suitor has down for endless dialogue.
So that got a little bit.
But the beginning of this was awesome. The boat ride, like when you read about the boat, was cool. The Bloofer lady, which was Lucy sucking on kids' blood, that was cool. All the things, any scene with Dracula was cool.
Real quick, I'm not familiar with Bloofer.
I'm pretty sure that's what they called her. It was, I'll look it up to make sure I'm saying, because I remember it was like really stupid sounding. But in the newspaper articles about Lucy, when she came back and was feeding on people when they thought she was dead, there was just the sightings of the Bloofer lady.
Oh, okay.
You don't remember that?
Vaguely.
Because I remember I was like, why Bloofer? Like they could have made that sound cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the children would call her the Bloofer lady, and that was like her, because back then they had a name. Everybody had a cool name in the newspaper if you were a villain of sorts, like the Jack the Rippers and the.
What does it mean?
I think Bloofer might have been the town or something. I don't know, or the area she was in, maybe.
Okay, I see.
But she was just the Bloofer. It wasn't creative, like. Oh, you're from Green Tree and you kill people. You're the Green Tree Killer. Like usually, their actually names aren't very cool. Not everyone's like the Zodiac Killer, and even that's stupid if you think about it. Oh, he just wrote Zodiac stuff. Like,
yeah. You have anything else?
I like Dracula, and I think people should read it. But I do have one addition. Yep. This book would have been a lot cooler if the Contra guys run it with machine guns. That would have made it fucking awesome. Like at the end, they just blow Dracula away with a fucking rocket launcher. Fucking Van Helsing throws away his stupid steaks and his little wafer crackers and just pulls out a BFG and just blasts the motherfucker. Like, yeah! I would have got fucking pumped for that.
You've been waiting to say that the entire episode, haven't you?
Actually, I forgot about that, but that's a good callback to you gotta have a callback to Castlevania episode.
Well, okay.
That's gonna be how I'm gonna solve anything that comes on any episode. We like any problem in the episode is like, oh man, we played Sonic for some reason, and the goddamn Contra would have fixed Sonic's ass. We blasted that Eggman.
What'd you like better, the book or the game?
That's a good question. I like the book better because it didn't piss me off so much. The game was fun. I think the better question is what has quote unquote better replay value. Would you rather play the game again or read the book again?
That's hard too. I don't know.
It's a whole book, but yeah.
Yeah, because
it's a toss up for me either way. Like I love the book and I love the game, so it's not.
I wanted to read the book again.
Yeah.
I wanted to because
But in a couple of years, you're gonna want to play Castlevania again too. Like once you get a long enough break. I also segue. I've been watching these way too much waste of time, like hour-long documentaries on video game records, like speedrun records. And the Castlevania one was ridiculous. Like these guys were able to whittle it down to like I think the record was like 9 minutes and something.
Oh my God.
Like to beat the game beginning to end or something. Or no, you know what? That was Ninja Gaiden. I forget what the Castlevania one was. But regardless, like they beat it so fast. I was like, how? I couldn't fucking beat it for hours and hours. Like, you jerks.
I think because Castlevania like a couple hours that has more replay / readability, but it's a really hard. It's a super hard.
Honestly, I can't really pick. I'm good with either one.
Yeah.
I will ask this though to end the episode. What is your favorite iteration of Dracula? Did you just like the book the best, or were you Bela Lugosi movies, the 90s movie, Francis Ford Coppola movie? You could even pick Renfield with the Nicolas Cage, like whatever version of Dracula you enjoy. Which one did you actually like the most?
That's hard. I kind of like. Okay, I have to be partial to the Coppola movie because I love.
But to be fair, that was the closest to the actual Dracula novel.
It was the differences weren't that big of a deal.
It would have been even better movie if Keanu Reeves could at all do a British accent or just did away with the accent altogether. But that was the only flaw in that movie, really, that I remember. But Gary Oldman as Dracula was awesome.
I love Gary Oldman too much. So that I really, really liked him. The hair was weird.
Yeah.
But other than that, I like Nosferatu.
You know what? I was gonna say I'm probably would be partial to Nosferatu.
Yeah,
because he was. I go by creepy factor. He was like scary,
and with there being no
though
sound,
he wasn't suave at all. Really.
Yeah.
What was his name? Count Dugan or something? Dooku.
I don't know.
But the Bela Lugosi one, I didn't find it. He was more of the seducer Dracula. I don't like the romanticized Draculas.
Yeah.
So I never got into like the Anne Rice's Dracula stuff. I'm sure they're good. It's just because I'm not a big vampire guy, and I think a part of it is because I don't like the romanticization of vampires. Like, oh, they're sexy and they seduce you. And it's like, I never found that scary. I don't find like the sex stuff scary, but I guess some people, probably if you're a woman, it makes sense because, you know, if you got seduced by some guy that's an actual creep and gives you syphilis or, you know, bites your neck and kills you or whatever. Yeah, that's like real fear. But for a guy, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I'm not scared of vampires.
I read one of those books. I didn't even know it. I read like the 5th one.
I just
out of
picked a
nowhere.
random one.
I got it at a yard sale or something like that. And I read it and I was like, why doesn't this make sense to me?
You didn't read the first 4.
It is like its own story standing alone, but the character had gone through, like the main character had already gone through like 5 different transformations before that. I remember what the first time I watched Nosferatu, I think I fell asleep because you're not used to watching movies that are just music.
Did you see the Willem Dafoe one?
I didn't see that one.
That one was awesome. Because I think it was supposed to be, if I remember correctly, it was the making of Nosferatu.
Yeah.
But then it was, I think it was colored, like in color. And then he was like actually a creepy vampire. It's like how they think they made him. It was cool. It's been a long time since I've seen that, so I don't remember if that's the exact synopsis there, but it was pretty fucking cool. And Willem Dafoe just does a great anything, so he's creepy. I think they were doing another one of those or something.
Oh, really?
With Willem Dafoe, if I remember correctly. I have to look that up.
Well, this has been a long episode of Arcade Bookshop, and we're happy that y'all are still listening, if you are. I thought it was a fun one.
Apparently next year that Nosferatu's coming out. And Willem Dafoe, he's not reprising his role. It's the Bill Skarsgård. He's going to be Nosferatu, but Willem Dafoe is going to play one of the professors or something. So that's cool. I like when they do that.
Yeah. Well, everybody, so if you hung on, thank you so much. This is fun for us. I hope it's fun for you guys. I hope you're reading and playing along like we hoped everybody would. Watch our Instagram. As we're recording this,
it's only September right now.
Yeah, it's September right now. We're recording ahead of time, and we make decisions on the fly. Just look out, watch for us as things as time goes on and we grow and everything. Try to rate us and review us. I hear that helps a lot with helping us grow. Yeah, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share it with your friends. Yeah, our Instagram is @arcade_bookshop. If I didn't mention that already. Reading and playing schedule is in the show notes and on our Instagram. And if you have any game and book recommendations, you can DM us on Instagram or shoot us a message at arcadebookshop@gmail.com. We would love to hear your suggestions. I don't know what kind of merch we have today in January since it's September, but right now,
stickers.
Right now in September, we got new stickers, guys.
Pretty sweet too.
And they're good. They're not. They're nice. They're not just those papery ones that just tear in half.
By January, you might even have like hoodies and hats and stuff.
Yeah, that'll be pretty cool. That's my dream. I hope people want to purchase those things.
Maybe like underpants and thongs.
Oh, that would be
That's
wonderful.
my dream.
I just want Arcade Bookshop up and down, inside and out.
Everywhere. Arcade Bookshop tampons. Shaped like a video game.
I'll
joystick.
use them.
Yeah, I bet you will.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Let's not forget Caleb and his life outside of our little podcast here.
Well, assuming my podcast is still up and running, I don't see why it wouldn't. It's been up for years and years and years and years and years. You can check out the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast at DPW Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, X, or whatever the fuck it's called in January now. Facebook and YouTube. And you could check out my website, calebjamesk.com. By this time, I've been published in the New Yorker, the Dublin Review, the Paris Review. I'm just thinking big. January, New Year, maybe I've been published in all these. I finally got a lot of acceptances. I hope.
You got 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. Or by the time this episode airs, I have been published in nothing else. And I'll be. But either way, you can check out stuff out at my website. I don't have merch, but I probably should get merch. Maybe when this drops, we'll too. I don't know. I'm not very ambitious on because it's work. I don't want to do all the work. But back to you, Bryce.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening again. This is Arcade Bookshop. I'm Bryce Yole, and across from me is Caleb James. Please do yourself a favor and stick a controller in one hand and your book in the other.